Hi everybody. The seismic hazard mapping exercise gives us a really good opportunity to talk about how we can editorialize with symbology. The rule of thumb definitely remains that if you're going to put values in your legend or on your map, you need to include units. But as this isn't a geology class, we're not going to go into the nitty-gritties of percent gravity and exceedance probability and all this. I do want to talk about how we can effectively use this symbology, though, to either tell a very balanced story or at least make sure we're including enough information on our map to make it clear to our audience what's happening. Or how maybe we can use the symbology to tell, certain editorialized stories. So to that end, I want to start out by showing you this data set that was produced by the Department of Air Quality in Utah. It's locations and their measured air emissions. If we look in the attribute table, you see that we've got the company and then, just different chemical outputs, volatile organic compounds, nitrous oxides, things like that. So we can symbolize on, maybe we could take the total emissions, or we could just take for fun, take the volatile organic compounds. So if we go into the symbology, instead of single symbol, let's symbolize on the quantity. So we're going to pull from our volatile organic compounds. And we can put a color ramp on this. So this is kind of our first choice in editorializing, right? We could pick something very inert, and we could have our low values be green, which might indicate health and wellness to people, or safety. Or we could do something like this. We could make it browner. So there are a lot of choices we can already make here, right? So let's apply that. We can't see them, so let's go into the properties for all symbols and make them much bigger. All right. So the first thing I want to draw to your attention is, with this base map, which symbols is your eye drawn to? Where's your eye going? And hopefully you agree that it's these darker ones, and that's due to the high contrast against the base map. If we were to switch this out with an aerial image, a satellite photo, it's going to be very dark. Our eye's going to be drawn to the light places, and you can experiment with this, and I hope you will. So here's our first step in editorializing, right? We can choose to draw our audience's eye to certain features based on the colors that we choose and the contrast that we create. Now, if we were to put a different color ramp on this and maybe go to that yellow, the yellow is going to jump off almost as much, maybe not quite as much, but that might be a way to help solve that problem. The other thing to think about is that it is somewhat natural to have your colors increasing in intensity as your values increase. And I apologize for not editing this first, but so that's another thing to think about. The easy way to handle this, if you did want to show this on a satellite photo and you wanted to flip it, or if you wanted to draw our attention to the lower emitters, just so that you have this shortcut, you go into the symbology again, left click on symbol, and you can flip those so that you're just inverting the color ramp, basically. So now you can see the yellow ones kind of disappear against the high intensity and high contrast of the red ones. So that's kind of contrast and intensity of color to kind of force your audience to look at the things you want them to look at, 101. Relative to the maps you guys made, you did a great job providing feedback for each other on your websites, and so keep that up. Here I've just pulled a couple examples from a previous semester just to give you different maps to look at, and because you're already getting feedback. So this is the color ramp that came in with the data, and let's just set the values aside and consider it low risk to high risk. It is a percentage, so the full range of values does go to 100, and I think that's just important for you to know and to acknowledge. The color ramp is an interesting one because red is typically, high threat, high risk. Now, a lot of weather, precipitation does end up going into the purple, sometimes even back to blue. These are all important things to just make note of, and you need to try and figure out what works best for you, what tells the best story for you. But for example, if you were to cut this off and show a state whose highest risk value was 20%, like Arizona, and just had low to high, red is a very reasonable color for the maximum threat, right? So your audience might perceive that the highest threats are right here and right here, period. I mean, forget the rest of the country. So that's an important thing to note. And so I think including the whole color ramp is a good idea. The other thing that works about that is that we start getting into the pinks and purples over here. And so your audience does have a sense that there is a bigger picture, and it kind of tells us Arizona's place in the bigger picture. In the next one, here we go. This one is one of those examples where we don't have the surrounding context. Did I skip one? No. The surrounding context because it's clipped to the state. But by including the full color ramp, we do have a sense that there's more to the story here. The reason I use this example is because my own curiosity has me wondering, well, where is this? You know, and we might assume California, but we're really missing a good chunk of information. We're kind of maxing out here, and I'm very curious about this. And I think this is a good example of where you might be able to use the locator map to provide that larger context. Why not throw the seismic hazard data set right down here into the locator map and give us the context for the rest of the country? That might be an interesting way to handle it. The last one here I bring up because of the clipping. So this cartographer decided that the legend was only going to show the data or reflect the data that's true for their state. We don't have units, so we don't know that 20 isn't the highest value. And it does say least and highest, which is an editorial comment. This is true for Illinois. It's not necessarily true for the United States. And so I think there isn't anything wrong with this. It's not incorrect, but it is very editorialized. And so I think these are the kinds of choices that we can make. We need to be deliberate about them and hopefully transparent about them. But that's why it's a really good idea to bounce your maps off other people and make sure objective bystanders are reading the message correctly, right? And sometimes it just takes looking at these things a lot to realize how misleading information like this can be. Yeah, I think just as an example, we have Missouri as an example. The other thing I wanted to draw to your attention is, you know, here we only have one class for the nuclear facilities, and we don't really know because there's nothing to contrast this with if it's 1, 2, or 3. So while this makes a really clean presentation, I think I would recommend putting different colors on these. Let me just do this really quickly. I'll go like that, and then so now you can see there is only one reactor here, but with the same color ramp and no other context, it's impossible to tell that looking at this. So again, this is the other thing I wanted to show you guys about this. This is an example of how you might apply this data set to the larger context to give us you know, this information versus cutting off the color ramp and just letting your audience think that this is the highest that there is. 20, you know, we know it's percent, so there's quite a bit of information missing here, but there isn't a really good way to, or an easy way to solve this problem. And so I just bring it up so that you guys can be very cognitive of it for the rest of the semester and think about making deliberate decisions. Now, there's nothing wrong with the way that anyone did this, and there isn't anything wrong going forward that you can do. But if you do have questions about how you might deliberately set this up, definitely throw it out to the group, shoot me an email, and there'll be interesting discussions to have. All right, that's it. Yeah, I hope you're getting something out of these exercises. And like I said, if you have questions, let me know. Thanks.